Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us for this future view of the creative organisation. My name's Roger Tregear and I'll moderate our discussion this afternoon. We'll have a conversation up here. Halfway through that we're going to pause and invite questions from you, and then we'll do that again towards the end of the session. So twice you'll have the opportunity to ask questions of our panellists, so you might start thinking about what they might be as we go. So as you know, the theme of the conference is unleashing creativity. And in this panel, what we want to do is investigate what that might mean. What would an organisation look and feel like having unleashed creativity? The diagrams we see, you see it up there, it looks pretty painful. Exploding heads. We think they're exploding, or perhaps something's landed on them. That doesn't seem terribly exciting, and perhaps is in breach of a few health and safety guidelines, I'd have thought. But it's got to be better than that, so we're going to talk about that. What would it mean to genuinely unleash creativity? What would it be like to experience life inside a genuinely creative organisation? And our panellists are two of the keynote speakers for the conference, Matthew Winterbottom and Nicholas Selk, and both of these guys work at the leading edge, the sharp end of unleashing creativity. Nick here on my left is the head of Cisco Design Thinking. He's worked in many aspects of innovation, strategy, design, realisation. His earlier life in HR gives him a nice insight into the complexities of building organisational culture, which of course is a key part of creativity. Nick's keynote is tomorrow, you might note, at 11:50, right here in this room, and he'll be talking about how to become and nurture world-class entrepreneurs. So that will be good to attend, the final keynote of the conference. On Nick's left, Matt Winterbottom is the head of social listening and analytics in the global social media team at HSBC. We could spend the afternoon just talking about that job title. You've not heard that job title before, unless, of course, you're at Matt's keynote earlier. So Matt's got a long history in business analysis in the financial services sector, including lots of large global transformation programs. And as you heard from his keynote, he focuses in his current role on harvesting and applying customer insights. So we've got two great people here to help us through a conversation about unleashing creativity, and you'll get your chance to do that as well. So let's start, and I'd like to understand, guys, what we talk very easily and glibly about creativity and unleashing creativity and the magical creative organisation, but what would it be like to be inside one? You know, what is a creative organisation? If you walked into one, perhaps you do it every day in your own organisations, I don't know, but if you walked into one, what would it feel like? What would it look like? Matt, kick us off.
Yeah, and I'll start with the job title first of all.
Yeah, please do. Yes, please explain yourself.
The reason why you've never heard of it before is it's totally made up, because it's very hard to define what I do on a day-to-day basis, so they just chuck some words in. So I just, first say, I don't particularly think I work for an overly creative industry. I think we're changing. And when we started to talk about what would it feel like if you were to walk into a really creative company or an organisation, I think the first thing that I think you would notice is different is diversity. So one of the things that I think really powers creativity is to get different people's perspectives on a problem or a challenge. And that helps to kind of spur the thought process. The more diverse people you have from different industries, different backgrounds, genders, sexual orientation, you're going to get a different perspective on the same problem, and that leads to better creativity. So I think we've seen across industries right now, you know, there's lots of sort of diversity quotas and people talking about hiring and proactively hiring people from minority groups, which is good, but I think a truly diverse organisation would value what it means to bring different people of different cultures and backgrounds together to actually help with creativity. So I think that's one of the key things you would see and feel that's different, truly diverse group.
And presumably not just having the diversity, but using that as an asset.
Absolutely.
In some way.
Picturing it as an asset. So one of one of the campaigns we had internally within the bank, which really interested me a couple of weeks ago, was people who have different types of learning disabilities. And we're starting to understand that they bring a different perspective to a lot of the challenges that we have in the bank. And we can use that as a real strength. So I think starting to think of people's differences as a real strength for your organization, which is a really nice thing to hear and a nice way of thinking about what it means to bring different people together to solve problems.
Okay, all right. Nick?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure it's super easy if you like walk into the lobby of a building and be like, well, is this company creative? Even if you walked on different floors, right, you like went up and down the elevator, and we have like 26 buildings in San Jose, something like that. If you look at the buildings and what we have going on, you would think that this is like death by gray. So I mean, I think visually that's very difficult to sort of like pinpoint and say, you know, is it a creative organization? I think you have to kind of, you know, look to other things, as Matt had mentioned, like diversity. I think you have to think about things like, what I would personally do is go talk to the people. I think they're probably, you know, the biggest, you know, indicator. So if you literally sit down and ask somebody, or think of it yourself, right, as you sit here, and I ask you that same question, is your company, you know, creative? If you have to think about it, and it's sort of thinking about, well, do we have programs in place, you know, or, you know, do we have processes that sort of spur our creativity? If you can't like immediately answer yes to those questions, it's kind of a good indicator that you're probably not working for a super creative organization. And I'll just sort of preface what I'm saying is that I also think of creativity as an input to innovation. So I sort of have this mindset of, you know, the innovation kind of drives the organization. And so creativity is the input to innovation for me. And so whether you use creativity or innovation, I'm just sort of saying you can think of those any which way you want. But if you have innovation programs or anything in that vein, then I would say, yeah, I think your company is trying to, you know, go down a path of creating more creativity and creating more innovation in your organization. So if those things exist and you have a way to get your voice heard, you know, or there's things that bring those types of programs in place, then I would say, yeah, that's kind of a good start. But we can probably dive into more about that later. But
So it would need to be a deliberate strategy, doesn't it? I mean, you need to decide what you're going to call it and what it means and what we're trying to achieve.
Yes and no. I think having formal innovation programs or having formal things to help spur creativity is great, but actually for me, spontaneity is actually one of the best forms of creativity. Like if I just, you know, threw a water bottle across the room and said, okay, why is that a good idea? And I asked you guys for ideas, you'd probably think I'm crazy, but who knows, maybe that me throwing a water bottle across the room, just, you know, an act of spontaneity might generate somebody's idea like, oh, we never thought that, you know, we could do that before or whatever, right? So like being too prescriptive about certain things will absolutely not lead you in the right direction. So there has to be an element of, you know, surprise, impromptu. So yes and no.
But how do you build that into the culture? Because it can't be just totally random, can it? You know, I understand you can't have planned spontaneity, but you can't just sit back and hope it happens either, can you?
This is kind of where it starts, isn't it? Because if you're trying to make your organization more creative, I think you do need those very purposeful structures and activity put in place to encourage people to think that way. But I think what we're trying to get at is that the keyword you mentioned there, which is culture, a culture of creativity. You want an organization that is naturally that way inclined, and for that to happen, I think we have to change some of the structures in place that you have today, which are stifling creativity. Some of the rules and hierarchy that are put in place that don't let people feel like they can be creative in their roles. So it's kind of a movement towards that culture.
Yeah, I mean, I even think too, so I came across this concept a couple months ago. I tried to pitch it internally. It got killed, of course. But there was something like, have you guys ever heard of like an entrepreneur in residence? Basically, you just bring a bunch of like entrepreneurs in your campus and you kind of like study them and they study you and whatever. So I came across this concept like a year ago called an artist in residence. And so the idea that we had, or is me and my team, we had this idea of like, we could literally bring in somebody new, stick them in sort of different locations, do live streams of watching them paint or compose music on the fly or jazz or whatever. And just the thought of doing something new and seeing something new might create sort of something new. And, again, I don't think they're, especially with creativity, so there's a difference between creativity and innovation, right? So creativity being the input to innovation for me, I think it could be as haphazard as possible. I actually think those wonderful things that you never thought of come from the complete chaos. So innovation, much more structured. Creativity, I don't think there should be any rules literally to creativity, because you don't know that the body of knowledge you have to take in your experience in life, cities you travel to, learning another language, learning a new skill, all those things, those are the things that when they come together, you don't know it yet, but when those things come together and then you've been asked to solve a certain problem, you take all those things and then you apply that to some sort of new idea that you're trying to sort of solve a problem for. So the more chaos in the creative side, to me, I think is the better. So if you were to say, like, what's the future of a truly creative company, you'd probably walk in and it'd be just total chaos, maybe in the lobby or something like that. But at least there's so many random things happening that maybe might help generate really wild new ideas that push our economy world forward.
You would, though, wouldn't you ultimately have to do what you tried to do, is pitch the idea?
Yeah.
It all turns into PowerPoint eventually, doesn't it?
Yes, I would say that, trying to pitch really wild and crazy ideas, you have to be, and this is definitely one of the things, right, with innovation too, you have to be willing to take risks, anytime you do something new. If you don't have the mindset of like, yeah, I know I'm probably going to pitch 10 ideas and 9 of them are going to fail, like, I don't really care. Like, for me, it's like I'm not worried about my batting average, like, oh, how many, ideas did I get implemented? It's just not how I think, but again, that's probably why I'm the head of Cisco Design Thinking. I don't know what to tell you, but like, I just don't think about that kind of stuff. To me, like, losses to me just don't bother me.
Yeah. They bother others, though.
Yeah, they bother others, and I understand that, but
that's the challenge. So how do you turn all of your employees to think like you think? How do you get them out of that way of fear of failure, which is, we talk about this a lot with Agile as well. We should be happy with failure, and we should learn from it, and we should move on. And I think the real challenge is, how do you put that into practice? How do you make that real? Because the simple fact is, people don't like to fail because they feel like they've failed. So one of the things I always think would be really nice, and I'd love to see it, is that we properly celebrate failures. In the same way, if you walk into an organization now and every month you might hold a sort of success of the month type thing, what's the project that went really well, and you give someone £30 of Amazon vouchers to say, well done. Why don't we do the same thing with failures? Why don't we say, this was something we tried this month and it didn't work, and this is why it didn't work, and we've learned something from it, but here's the same reward for giving it a go. And you start to create a culture of, what's the worst that can happen? I'm going to get some free Amazon vouchers if I don't do this well.
Sorry, I wasn't looking at my phone.
Yeah, how rude.
I literally, and I didn't know we actually did this as a company. I was like, oh, that's really impressive. I was just in RTP in Raleigh yesterday, and literally in the elevator, if you see this, it says failure is the beginning of success, and it's one of our SVPs, and he's literally celebrating failure. I saw this photo, and I was like, wow, that's great. Like, I'm really glad that we're actually, our SVPs are coming in there and saying like how they, are we allowed to, whatever, F up. And actually there's something called, I will say this because it's actually, if you want to know about it, it's called fuck up nights. And they're actually an opportunity where if you want to kind of go and share when you F up, that might be something that, again, I totally agree with you though, right? Like this stigma of like failure and stuff, learn faster. There's no such thing as failure or learning quickly, whatever it might be. But I definitely think that is a huge thing. And I think the younger generation is, I guess, maybe more willing to sort of take those risks in some cases. And I understand that too. Like as I get older, I don't know if I'm going to have the same risk appetite when if I have kids and I'm, 20, I'm 55 or 60 and I'm close to retirement, I take a risk and then I, get sacked or canned and then I don't know. I just don't know. I don't know the answer to that. But right now, I'm absolutely not worried about it.
So you're not so concerned about measuring success, but a financial services company might be? No?
Absolutely. It's all we care about.
You have a bottomless budget for having fun, being creative?
And this is a real challenge. The idea of a failure is still seen as a bad thing. If the business case doesn't stack up, why would we invest in something that we don't know if it's going to work? I think the difference has been, and to its credit, for all its pros and cons, the move to more agile ways of working is slowly starting to sink in with our senior leadership. And I think that's great because some of those principles and values lead to more creativity. We recently commissioned a report into what are the skills we look for in banking in the future, because automation, AI, and machine learning is going to wipe out half of what we do. We work in figures. We don't need to do that decisioning. All of that stuff's going to go. And the answer they came up with, we need creativity. Creativity is a skill that we absolutely need for the future, because that's what machines can't do well. So I think there's an acknowledgement that we need to be more creative, and we're doing loads of the practical things to try and encourage that internally, which is great. I'm still yet to see that culture of, yeah, sure, here's a bit of money, go and give it a go. And part of that's creating true trust. I think fintechs and startups do this really well, because they're a small group of people, they're co-located, they get to know each other really well, so they're not afraid of saying, I've got a really good idea. You know, they build that relationship, and in a big organization like ours, we don't have the luxury of knowing everybody with all the money and having that sort of more personal relationship. So I think we need to find a way of building more trust within an organization to let go of that command and control structure and say, you guys are the experts in that thing, you've got the people you need, you go away and do something. If it doesn't work, tell me why it didn't work, learn from it. And as long as you're learning from it.
And surely in every organisation there would be parts of it that we'd want to guardrail and not do that, wouldn't we? I mean, you know, creative banking hasn't had a good rap in the last little while.
Yeah.
So there are some parts of anyone's business that,
for sure,
that we need to regulate.
Yeah.
Or someone else wants to regulate anyway.
Yeah, but it shouldn't, for me, that shouldn't be a barrier to stop trying to do creative things in any area of the business. And we do actively encourage it in all sectors of the bank now.
But it's part of that trust thing, isn't it?
Yeah,
because you know, here are the boundaries.
Yeah, practical boundaries. I think any type of constraint is a constraint to creativity. Any type of, just look at meetings we hold. So as BAs, and when we have a workshop and we're trying to be creative, we're taught to put an agenda in place and time box everything. And we, to your point, sometimes you need chaos, but we're trained not to work in chaos. We're trained to put structure around everything we do, thinking that's going to get us the best output. And if we're trying to be more creative, those structures don't help us necessarily. They constrain us. So we need to think differently around how we get people to be creative.
So all those ageing men and women that are on the board and the senior executive floor, Nick, who used to be creative but never are, and when you get there, you won't be creative either. I mean, we're doomed, are we? We need creativity for geriatrics. That's what we need.
Yeah. Well, okay. So another. Yeah, I was gonna say. So another thing that's like, I think creativity also has this like. Well, first off, let's all just acknowledge the fact that it's like super subjective, right? Yeah. Let's just level that out right away. What I think is creative, definitely somebody is going to think the opposite. Like, that's not creative. So okay, good. We got that out of the way. But. I don't know. I don't know. That's a really good question. I don't know what the answer to that is. But I just want to pick up on something Matt said, that I do think, though, there is a balance. Like if I just point to somebody in the audience and I say, tell me an idea, you're probably going to struggle with that like pretty quickly, right? Just give me an idea in under 10 seconds. But if I were to say, give me an idea that involves this water bottle and how to best launch it across the room using rubber bands. Right? So I'm not telling you I'm just giving you a mild constraint. You're probably better, you're going to be giving me better ideas. I mean, that was horrible grammar. But you get my point, right? So like the analogy that we always like to give is, I'll just tell you that I want you to go north on a highway. I don't care how many lanes, I don't, whatever it might be, but just, I know I need you to go north. That's kind of the problem we're looking to go. Because if I just tell you, like, we just need any and all ideas, I'm going to get the ideas of the cafeteria food sucks. We should not be having paper towels in the restrooms. We need hand blow dryers. Like, so I think certain structure is absolutely needed. Otherwise, especially from the innovation side, again, the creativity side, I'm all for chaos. But on the true innovation side, I think that needs a little bit more structure. Sorry.
And we probably need to learn how to do that, don't we? I mean, not many organisations, in your exact example of launching the bottle across the room, it would be an exercise and 1,000 like it that we should do on a regular basis, because we've got to get rid of the command and control structures and the uncreative stuff.
And if we want to, I don't know if you guys have heard, there's a really good book, The Surprising Power of Liberating Structures. If you've not, it's a great book. It's worth a read. There's an iPhone app. Download it. It's free. And that is all about, to your point, putting a little bit of structure around ideation and co-creation, and giving different techniques, practical techniques that any BA can take away to actually use to help try and be more creative. And we've tried these, and they're surprisingly simple, but they work. They're practical, they're low kind of constraint, but they absolutely work. So it's a great, liberating structures. Look it up, it's really good.
Cool. Yeah, okay. Some questions from you? Somewhere we've got people with microphones who will, if you put your hand up, they'll run towards you.
Don't go easy on us either.
If you're the people with the microphones, if you see a hand in the air, just pick one. But we'll let you be in charge of that. Thank you.
Hi, thank you so much. Ooh, that's really loud. For being here today and sharing your thoughts. Nick, the first thing I thought when you said that you can't tell that a company's creative when you walk into it,
Yeah.
I immediately looked at this background and how it's purple and whatever those band things are there. And to me, just this visual tells me that it's a creative place. So I disagree with you a little bit. And I think if you've got a 4 gray wall company, you might want to change that to be more colorful to spur on creativity. So what are your thoughts about that?
So we'll just say that we all know that creativity is subjective, and not that I don't also love these lovely bar things and purple. How many of you guys work in a company where you have a bunch of bean bags, ping pong tables, Nerf guns, or, well, whatever. Okay, a couple of you guys in the back, right? Okay, I could walk into that room and might think that they're super creative, but are people actually creative, or are you just putting on the show that says you're creative, right? Are you putting on some sort of like theater show? Or, there's this concept called like innovation theater, right? Where you just have a bunch of stuff that you market that sounds really good to the outside world to make everybody think that your company is so innovative and so creative, yet behind the doors it's a bunch of bureaucracy and crap, right? So I don't know how to answer that in a really great way, but I can say, like, yes, I understand exactly what you're saying. I wish I could also change the 4 gray walls. I'm not in charge of WPR. So I can't do that, but I understand exactly what you're saying. And for me, I would do that. I agree with you. I would try to do whatever I could to spur that creativity. But I'm not, I guess what I wouldn't be going, I don't want to go the whole way and say just because I have that is going to mean that we have a creative organization. I think it gives you the best shot at it for sure. And we are trying, right? So there's certain floors that we go to that are all, newly renovated, and they have all this stuff, like whatever. But again, I don't think that that's an indicator of a truly creative organization or a truly innovative organization.
It would make a big difference, though, wouldn't it? A mindset change if you said to everyone, see all these grey walls, here's a bunch of paint and pens and whatever, do what you like.
That would be awesome.
And the first person who was, the C-suite turned up and they did it first, and then everyone, that would be...
Yeah,
it would
co-create wall creation.
It would be a mess. You'd
Yeah.
think, bring back the grey walls, I can't stand it, but it would be a mindset change, yeah?
I was going to say, it is a superficial change, and it's not going to make you a creative organization, but we've been through a lot of renovation, a lot of our buildings, a lot more collaborative spaces, open spaces. The one thing it does do is just improve morale and motivation, which is an important part of this. People want to feel like they want to work in that environment, so I agree it's not going to cause your paradigm shift to happen by painting the walls a pretty color, but you should do a business case for some paint. But it's got some value to it, absolutely, and it definitely, from a people perspective, I think it's valuable.
Okay, another question. Thank you.
So I'm kind of seeing the theme here. Hi, my name's Melissa. Nice to meet both of you. About talking about startups, and you had just made a joke about creativity for geriatrics. So really, I'd like to understand, how do you bridge the gap between those two mindsets? Because you do have these companies that are more mature, and you have people that are working there that have been there for 30 years, 40 years, and then you have a different mindset as well. So what would be your take on bridging that gap and making influence there? So one of the
core fundamentals of design thinking is collaboration. And so you cannot do it in a vacuum. And so to your point earlier of like diversity and inclusion, almost everything we do is always done with trying to come up with the most diverse like group of people when we do certain whatever design sprints or things that we do to create new solutions or improve customer experience, whatever that is. We literally try to come up with the like melting pot of the world, you know, so to speak, whenever, and when, it's not always possible, you know, and it's just a fact, right? Like in Cisco, we have you know, a lot more men than women. It's just because of the field that we are in. We are trying very hard to get more and more women into tech and things like that. But yes, I think that's very difficult. And yeah, to your point, like I always say this, like startups want to be like big companies want to start acting like startups. And it's just because they all want to find that sweet spot of they want to continue to, you know, innovate at the pace and scale of a startup, but then they need to then scale that idea at a big company way, right? So it's just this, everyone's trying to act like the other person, but because it is very difficult, right? To sort of to do that, and yeah, so I don't know.
And just because someone's been in an organization a long time, they're used to the way things work, it doesn't make them any less creative inside. So for me, it's the same problem. You need to give them the headspace to think about this stuff and the opportunity to be creative. So some of those techniques you can put in place practically to give people the opportunity to be more creative. Whether or not you've been there 30 years, 20 years, or you're fresh out of university. I think some people do get trained to work in a certain way, but giving them the opportunity to be creative and finding ways to put that in place in your organization, they should still be up for it and still be willing and wanting to participate, to your point, and be collaborative with others.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's also just, I know this because I know a couple guys who are a little bit older, they're getting close to retire, and they're just like, look, I'm just biding my time. I'm getting close to retirement, and it's just not something I'm interested in. Like, I'm not, you know, change for me right now would be really difficult for me because I'm a little bit older and I don't do well with change as well as if I was your age, Nick. Like, so, yes, but I do think, though, that you have to, you know, older people have a lot of wisdom, too, so you have to try to, like, suck them back in and say, look, we need your experience. Like, don't run away and, you know, be in a dark hole. Like, pull them into the conversation and say, you're adding a ton of value. We need you to help with the energy and all the good stuff that comes with the younger millennial generation, but we need to bring that expertise in wherever we can.
One more question.
Yes, first of all, thank you for your time. I really appreciate hearing your perspectives. My question is, what role does metrics play in creativity and the bottom line of the company, especially from Matt's presentation this morning? There was a lot of analytical-based analysis.
What was the first one then? What role does...
Metrics.
What role does metrics play in the bottom line of the company?
Interesting. And I suppose this comes to a question we were discussing on how do you put a value on creativity. So we don't purposely metric or monitor how creative we are, but we understand that creativity is what can differentiate us in the marketplace, is what can help provide customers with better services, better products and propositions. So we see an intrinsic value in creativity because we know it'll lead to us having a stronger position in the marketplace. So we absolutely don't monitor and measure anything, with the only exception of, and I think you've got a similar thing in Cisco, which is, and I've heard a couple of presentations talk about it, about having a systematic way of people raising ideas. So how many ideas have been generated by people in the bank? What can we do to increase the generation of those ideas? I have a problem with idea boards and voting like this because when you're putting forward an idea, you're putting forward a solution. You're saying, I've got a problem, I've found a possible solution, what do you think about this solution? And as soon as you do that, if you're outside of that system or that department and you're looking and saying, oh, that person's thought of an idea, yeah, seems reasonable, do that, I like the idea of that, you vote for it. What I would love to see is we advertise our problems more. We don't ask people for ideas, we just ask them to talk about problems they're having. Promote problems within your organization, let people look at the problems, because that's when they're going to start thinking about your problem from a different perspective and give a different viewpoint. So one of the things I'd really love to see, and I'm trying to push for it, is, yeah, we've got idea boards, let's have problem boards, let's just surface issues, problems, and let everybody look at them, and the more people look at them, the more ideas we're going to get and creative ways to solve them.
Matt, you said that you know, the organisation knows that the more creative it is, the stronger position it will have in the market.
Yep.
How does it know?
We commission research specifically on that fact. So, you know, we've suffered heavily from disruption of the fintechs that have emerged over the years, taking market share. And what we've seen is they look at the traditional services a bank offers from a different perspective. They look at it from a different customer perspective as well in what we're offering and how we're doing it. And they've done that because they're small and they are naturally creative. They just think about the problem differently. And we've rested on our laurels for a long time and we carry on doing the same thing. So I think it's energized us, which is why disruption's so good, because it's made an existing company like ours say, hold on, we need to do things differently. How do we do that? And there's been a massive amount of activity over the past couple of years to try and pull in more creative thinking, design thinking, all of these techniques to help us kind of...
So is this saying that it's useful and necessary to match the culture of our target marketplace? I mean, the marketplace will have a creative maturity of various levels, and if we're dealing with 18-year-olds who spent their adult life with a smartphone, then asking them to fax a form to you is going to
I don't know if it's just about the marketplace. I just think ultimately what we're trying to do here is get people to think about things differently from what they always have done.
Yeah.
And I think it's relevant for any market and for any marketplace and for any demographic as well. So, yeah, I just think we need to try and how do we get different viewpoints on the same issues that we've always had and the new problems we're having.
Can I just answer? Sorry, I forgot your name over there, but I apologize. But I just I'll get really tactical from a Cisco perspective. We have metrics for our innovation programs. And yes, in the beginning, right, so we've been running for roughly 6 years, something like that. In the beginning, it was definitely like how many ideas. It was a lot more engagement metrics, right? So how many ideas, how many people were coming online, you know, things like that. But now we have gone to business impact. So we are at that level now where I am literally, my metrics are I have to deliver $2 million in new revenue, and that's just a metric that I'm judged on. And I also have like an NPS score, so every custom workshop that I do, you know, I get scored on that. And then, yeah, I do about like 5% or 10% of my role is training as well. So how many people can we train on Cisco design thinking as well? So I just wanted to get like super tactical. And if you want to like level that up, for me, the ultimate metric is, I guess you would say, is like your stock price as a company. It's probably no surprise that companies like Google and Amazon and where they're at is their stock price is super high, and Apple. Like, I wouldn't say it's a one-to-one correlation, but there is definitely something there. Those companies are continuously innovate and reinvent themselves and stay ahead of the curve, and they demand a higher stock value for that. And so that's, you know, we are trying, like Cisco we were just out, you know, a couple years ago, we were in like the 30s and we just couldn't really crack that. And now we're at like mid 50s, which is a huge jump for us in almost a year and a half. We are pushing and pushing and pushing. So anyway, I just wanted to get tactical there for a second.
The bad news, Nick, is that they're training you to be an elderly conservative executive.
I will not.
You just accepted targets,
No,
stock price, it's all happening, Nick.
So on that point, I actually set my own metrics though. Okay. So my boss came to me and said, well, what do you want to be measured on for this year, Nick?
Okay.
So I think I'm just not cut out to be a corporate, there's a level at which I'm okay with, and then after that, like, there's too much, yeah, I can't.
One more question.
Hi, my name is Micah. I just wanted to ask, kind of touching on diversity again, but going a little bit deeper than what you can see on the surface. I know and work with people who thrive in situations where creativity and ambiguity and chaos are welcome, and they do really well in those scenarios. But I also know people who thrive in more structured, well-defined requirements type environments. And how do you foster a culture around creativity without alienating people that are admittedly not as creative, and help them see themselves in your organization as being valuable to partner with the people that maybe do have a little bit more of a creative mindset, and not lose the people that bring structure to innovation because there's such a focus on chaos and creativity.
So I think there are techniques that we can do. For us, and what we've spent a lot of time doing recently is really trying to hone facilitation as a skill set. So in that scenario, what you want is for somebody to be ensuring inclusivity, ensuring that everybody has a contribution to what it is you're talking about. So for us, we've looked at the very practical side. So let's train people to be better facilitators. And as I mentioned, that book, Liberating Structures, if you're going to read anything, read that, because I think it answers your question, which is you put a little bit of structure around creative thinking and creative ways of coming up with ideas, and it really works. So you can hit both those markets of the naturally creative people and the people who are maybe used to doing things in the same old way. But yeah.
Do you think we could measure the maturity of creativity in an organization? You know, classic maturity model, 1 to 5.
You can clearly see that we didn't go through the questions beforehand.
No, neither did I. That's not even written here.
I don't know. I'd have to think about. I mean,
Because there needs to be some kind of structure to say it's working, or
I mean,
it
from a
can't be
qualitative
just
point of
random.
view, maybe you could do it from I don't know, how people feel about certain areas, plus.
So if you were going to do an audit of creativity, right, that's what you'd be doing.
Yeah.
What would you look for?
yeah, I'd look for things
Diversity?
like what programs are in place. If again, I guess I kind of look at creativity is so tough because in my world it's like it's the input to innovation. So it's so hard to define the creativity part of it because it's. But if I were to look at it from an innovation lens, I would say, do you have things like ways for people to submit ideas? And by the way, yes, we have you'll see tomorrow in my keynote, we have a way for us to do have like idea boards and things, but we don't allow for any idea. So we have very structured challenges that we say, these are the problems we're focused on, these are the challenges that have a sponsor behind it and have a budget to actually go implement ideas. So we do not allow for like any wild idea. But I think things like that, right? What trainings do you offer around innovation? How are you upskilling your employees in what's new? Design thinking, lean startup, agile. Like, I think, do your leaders know what those things are, right? So, like, a lot of us know this stuff, but the higher I go, the less they know. Period. I mean, I don't want to name, I'm not going to throw out any names, but I will say that, like, my boss's boss, like, if I asked him to define the word innovation, like, I'm sure he knows, but I don't think if I were to say, what's our innovation strategy, I'm not sure, that they would be able to say so I don't know. I think there's communication issue. I think communication is one, awareness, but to get to a level where you're saying, like, you're an expert, some sort of, like, mature creativity or must be something going on. Okay, thank you. It's like, gosh. But anyway, so I don't know. That's a really hard one. I'd have to sit down and think about it. We did an innovation maturity model. We've homegrown, built our own, but in creativity maturity model, that's...
And you could have some cultural measures in there as well. So you get lots of maturity models around the culture of organizations. So I'm sure there's something you could do to help guide you or guide new companies on that sort of movement.
Someone should just do that.
Yeah, someone create that. That'd be great.
That would be awesome.
Presentation next year. We're all coming.
Done. Then sell it.
Any more questions? Where are we? There's a hand up down there. There's 2 hands. Microphone's heading your way. Keep your hands up so we can, there we go.
I was curious if you can talk a little bit about hiring for this, because it feels to me as someone looking for work, there's a massive echo, that HR really kind of stands in the way. Like me getting through the applicant trackage system and being like, I'm awesomely creative, it's not going to work out.
Oh, man.
HR background.
Yeah. So It depends on what role, but I don't know. There's not a good answer for that one, to be totally honest with you. Even when I got hired in Cisco, so I've been at Cisco twice. So I got hired in, and then I left for 2 years, and then I'm back again. And it was only because I was consulting Cisco at first, and then they poached me, and then, so I think that I don't have a good answer for you. Those creativity roles are super hard to find. I think that I don't have a good answer for you.
But I suppose in addition to hiring specific roles around creativity, there's nothing to stop you looking for employees who are naturally creative. So one of the things that I know I do in all my recruitment, we have a very kind of laid out capability-based framework when we're recruiting. You pick kind of questions from different capability areas for the role. It's all very boring and very standard, and people prepare for it and they come with their ready done answers. You don't get anything from the applicant. You don't really understand how they work and how they think. So I always throw in a challenge, and the main part of my interview is usually a question or a problem statement. Here's a problem. What would you do about it? How would you approach it? How do you think about it? Prepare a slide deck of 5 or 6 slides and talk me through your thinking. And I do that just to help understand how that individual thinks about problems, what they consider. And you'll find you get massive variation in candidates. One of the problems I always had was you get the same answers to all the same questions, and it's very hard to differentiate a more creative candidate from any other. If you put a creative challenge in your interview techniques, it's quite a nice way of starting to better understand how people think.
Great question.
Next question.
Can I just ask what book you referenced as far as liberating structures?
It's something around the surprising power of liberating structures by a guy with a German surname that I can't remember. But if you look on the iOS App Store, I think it's called Lisa or Lisa. I've got it on my phone. I'll show you afterwards.
Okay, thank you.
One more question. Down here. Thank you.
Hi. I'm curious as to HSBC and Cisco being rather large companies with thousands of employees, as I work for a company that has thousands, 46, 50,000 employees. How do you encourage and listen and pay attention to your frontline employees and their ideas, and how do you encourage that? Do you do crowdsourcing or things of that nature? What kind of techniques and processes do you have in place to encourage that?
So we crowdsource our ideas. We have a mixture of like a homegrown kind of front-end tool part, and then we have like a SaaS provider from the back end. As I mentioned earlier, like we don't just allow for any idea though. It's just the sheer volume that you will get from that is unmanageable, and the last thing you want to do is say, hey, we really want your idea, and then you have like 10,000 ideas you got to go through, and then if you don't do anything with those ideas, that's worse than just not asking for them. So we've learned that we just have to ask for those ideas as it relates to true business problems that have a sponsor behind it. We have a budget and it's a priority for them. And then those challenges are displayed internally, and if you have a good idea for that, you go ahead and do that. I am desperately trying to work with our product managers to get closer to our frontline employees because they have the next best thing to the customer voice. Right? So I always say, go to the customer, because it's like the game of telephone, right? It's like, if you go to the customer, they're going to tell you exactly what the thing is, but if then you rely on the frontline person and then they roll that up, and then you roll that up, and you roll that up, 6 people later, it has nothing to do with what the actual customer wanted. So, but they are the next best thing. So the closer you can get to the customer, the better. But in our world, I had to be totally honest, at least in the Cisco land, like, our product managers are not product managers, they're product marketers. They don't truly own the requirements. They don't truly, there's like, oh, Agile doesn't work. No, Agile works. Your organizational structure and culture break it, okay? So, I don't know, yes. So we try as hard as we can. I'm trying to push that further as much as I can.
Yeah, we do something slightly different in that we do have budget, but this wasn't from a ideation or creativity point of view. It was from a staff morale. So a lot of our frontline were telling us, you see all these change programs going on, but none of them are helping me with the problems that I have in the front line. So we introduced an internal program called Bubbles, and the concept was the same as you, which is we do get loads and loads of ideas, too many to manage. but the system allows different frontline staff to like other people's nominations, and the concept is it eventually bubbles up, and the most frequent or common complaints from our frontline bubble up to the top, and there's dedicated funding to fix frontline problems with the kind of understanding that if we fix problems for our staff, it is resolving problems for our customer. But again, I don't like the way the system only kind of lets you bubble up solutions to problems rather than problems themselves. So I'd much prefer some of the concepts of, here's a problem we're experiencing, what are your ideas to fix it?
Yep. Time for one more question, if we have one.
Hi there. In your own definition of what creativity is, this is a horrible echo. There is a delay, and it's kind of freaking me out. Do you consider yourself creative? And either way, yes or no, what's the last creative thing you've done?
Oh, for sure, yeah. So yes, I do consider myself extremely creative. Let's see, so I like to get myself into everything. Like, I'm a yes guy. If you ask me something, like, I will just say yes to everything. So my wife and I, we also buy homes and we flip them. And so I try to do as much as work as I can when I'm home, when I'm not traveling, but I custom built our kitchen shelves and our exhaust hood. So I have to get my hands dirty because I mostly am virtual. So I literally just designed our hood, and then I built it and got a bunch of bloody knuckles from it. But yeah, I would say designing that, so I think that's kind of creative. And again, it's all subjective. So I would say, yes, of course I'm creative.
And it's a networked hood, yeah?
What's a what?
It's a networked.
Networked, yeah. There's IoT in there. Yeah.
I'm a little bit disappointed. You clearly didn't see my presentation this morning because that was that was all about how I think I'm being creative. I never even thought about how creative I was. But about 2 weeks ago, my senior manager in my function came up to me, and we were implementing a new tool to help solve some problems that we're experiencing in the way we manage our runway of activity and insights, etc. And she just said to me, how did you come up with this? How did you even think about this? And I think some creative people, they just naturally think that way. You just think about different ways of solving a problem. And again, I think the reason why I'm creative is my background in business analysis. I've been in lots of different areas. I've seen lots of different problems. So you naturally are constantly thinking of ways to fix things. And that just helps make you more creative. That's the way you just naturally think.
It's like a curse now. Like, once you've been infected by if you really dive into it, of like looking at everything as like problems and solutions, and thinking about like who are the core users and what are you trying to get to, like, my wife also does a lot of design thinking background. She actually has her master's in it, and we actually have a whiteboard, and we have literally done design thinking sessions in our living room. So it's yeah. Once you're infected, it's really hard because you start thinking. I'll give you a good example. Like, I was in the hotel room, and literally the faucet comes out, like, and then it goes straight down into the sink. And I couldn't get my hands without having to touch the bottom to like wash them. Like, who thought of that from a design perspective? Like, what moron? Like, can't wash my hands without touching the bottom of the sink. So I don't know. Once it's in you, and then it's very hard to get it out of you. But then you start thinking of creative ways. Well, why did you even need the faucet in the first place? Like, yeah.
Okay. So if we were to wrap up, what do you think each of you are the one or two things that are the major roadblocks for an organisation towards becoming more creative? Which is to say, what are the things you'd need to change first? Who wants to start? Matt? We had a vote, Matt, and you're starting first.
Yes.
I think the roadblock is culture. I think, and I would probably say fear of failure, fear of getting things wrong in culture is a big one,
Okay.
and the transparency of problems in an organization. So you need to get comfortable with sharing problems
Yep.
and failing and being rewarded for failure.
To give people permission to be creative.
100%.
Yep,
And
okay.
more than just lip service, do things to show them that that's okay.
Yeah. Okay, Nick?
Yeah, the fear of failure one is really good. I guess I'd also say too, like, middle management. Sorry to say it, but a lot gets stuck right there. It's that frozen middle layer, and until I think a couple things change, right? Like compensation structures tied to, what are you selling versus what are you delivering, and there's just this disconnect between, what the customers want and what sales is delivering, or what sales is pushing and product is making, and I just think that, if you can allow for the utopia of it, but the problem is your execs will say the right thing, your middle manager will nod their head, go, yeah, and then it comes time to, well, then do something different and make a change, they'll go, yeah, but that'll affect my, quarterly bonus or whatever it is. And so until you start, if you truly want to start changing something, start with changing your compensation structures, because align those to what you actually want to do. So the people who are going to take those risks, who are going to try to come up with crazy ideas and fail, go reward those people. You get actually punished for failing the company, and I just think that that's a really bad structure to begin with. So align your incentives with what you're trying to do, and
it's a nice easy one for them to all implement then.
Yeah, go change your compensation.
Go change your compensation.
Yeah, cheers.
Okay, all right, that's good. We've run out of time, ladies and gentlemen. Would you join me in thanking Matt and Nick for a stimulating conversation? Thank you.